from Chron.com. Very appropriate, isn't it? C-H-R-O-N, Chron.com. Truck owner wants DEA to pay up after botched sting, by Dane Schiller. The phone rang before sunrise. It woke Craig Patty, owner of a tiny North Texas trucking company, to vexing news about Truck 793, a big red semi supposedly getting repairs in Houston. The caller, a business colleague, said, "Your driver was shot in your truck. Your truck was loaded with marijuana. He was shot 8 times while sitting in the cab. Do you know anything about your driver hauling marijuana?" As he said, "What did you say? Could you please repeat that?" The truck, it turned out, had been everywhere but in the repair shop. It was commandeered by one of his drivers who was secretly working with federal agents. The truck had been hauling marijuana from the border as part of an undercover operation. And without Patty's knowledge, the DEA was paying his driver, Lawrence Chapa, to use the truck to bust traffickers. At least 17 hours before that early morning phone call, Chapa was shot dead in front of more than a dozen law enforcement officers, all of them taken by surprise by hijackers trying to steal the red Kenworth T600 truck and its load of pot. This is what happens when amateurs get involved in drug running. And by amateurs, I mean the motherfuckers at the DEA and this one guy who thought he was a smart motherfucker, that he could take his boss's truck and basically rent it to the DEA to help them out. And I wonder how much he was getting paid. But you know what? He certainly got what he had coming. And this is the reality. If you contribute to the drug war, excuse me, not the war on drugs, the war on some drugs. But if you accept bad ideas and act on bad ideas, they'll get you killed. And in this case, this is probably a guy who deserved it for trying to bust people, simply providing a good that other people want to consume. At least, in the confusion of the attack in northwest Harris County, compounded by officers in the operation not all knowing each other, a Houston policeman shot and wounded a Harris County sheriff's deputy. But 8 months later, Patty still can't get compensation from the U.S. government's decision to use his truck and employee without his permission. Now, using the employee, different issue. There's no such thing as using someone else's employee. You don't need his permission for that. But the truck, yeah. His company, which hauls sand as part of hydraulic fracturing operations for oil and gas companies, was pushed to the brink of failure after the attack because the truck was knocked out of commission. Patty had only one other truck in operation. And documents, think about it. They couldn't get a truck from like a fleet of vehicles somewhere. They couldn't I'm sure if the drug war was righteous, and there are enough people who believe it is, they could find some trucking company owner who would agree to this, who would let them rent the truck discreetly. But no, because the DEA is too fucking cheap to even rent a truck to do a sting, this guy gets fucked. And it's worse because now he's out the entire fucking truck. In documents shared with the Houston Chronicle, he has demanded the DEA pay $133,000 in repairs and lost wages over the bullet-sprayed truck, and $1.3 million more for the damage to himself and his family, who fear retaliation by a drug cartel over the bungled narcotic sting. Now that's another fucked up aspect I hadn't even considered about this, but think about it. If the truck is owned by him and they knew about this and they were suggesting somehow that the owner of the truck was involved in running or who knows what, yeah. Holy shit, you've just exposed this guy to a whole other risk. As Patty said, who before buying his trucks, by the way, incidentally, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, when you start a new business, there are obvious pitfalls. You go through a learning curve, but whoever would be ready to deal with this? How am I, a small businessman, father of 3, American Joe from Texas, supposed to make a claim against a federal agency that has conveniently shrouded itself behind a red, white, and blue cloak of confidentiality and secrecy? Hate to break it to you, sir, but the red, white, and blue cloak of confidentiality and secrecy is the flag itself that hides the bullshit behind every patriot's mind of their insecurity that leads them to be tribalistic worshippers of symbols in the first place. Yes, like George Carlin, I'll leave symbols to the symbol-minded. Copies of letters and emails from the insurance company state that it won't pay for repairs because the truck was part of a law enforcement operation. Patty got $401,000 from his retirement fund to repair the truck, which was out of operation for 100 days. I was not part of this. He said I had absolutely no knowledge of it until after it happened. For its part, the DEA has not admitted that it was using Chapa as a spy because its official policy is to not comment on whether someone was an informant. Of course, we can't talk about how we fucked you over because it's secret government business. Lisa Johnson, a spokeswoman for the DEA Houston Division, confirmed that his demand was received and noted that it would be investigated, but the Chronicle said Chapa was an informant based on interviews with multiple law enforcement officials who spoke on the condition that they not be named, and later by courtroom comments of prosecutors. The request chronicles much of what Patty's been through, including operating costs and everything repaired. This is just... Patty hired Chapa 5 weeks before the shooting and now wonders how many of the trips in the $90,000 rig included DEA work. GPS information from the truck reveals an unauthorized trek to the Rio Grande Valley. Days before Chapa was killed, he took a 1,000-mile round trip detour from the route he was supposed to travel. Perhaps most unnerving, Patty says, is that drug mobsters now likely know his name and certainly know his truck. Panic at the Patty home these days can be triggered by something as simple as a deer scampering through the wooded yard or a car pulling into the driveway. Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder caused by government. One morning as his wife made breakfast, one of his young sons suddenly bolted across the house, yelling, "Get the guns!" A Bronco SUV had pulled into the driveway past a broken gate. The dogs were barking in the darkness. Patty grabbed a pistol and headed for the front yard. The Bronco pulled away, leaving a shiny object by the front walkway. It turned out to be the morning newspaper wrapped in a plastic bag reflecting a neighbor's floodlight. I mean, this is like classic hyper tension, hyper awareness, that comes from a traumatic event. It doesn't have to be caused by combat. As he said, the whole ordeal has forced his children to grow up more quickly than he'd like. I wanted to keep them young as long as I could. I've gone to great lengths to keep my son believing in Santa Claus, and now I'm talking to him about death, mayhem, and drug cartels. Well, that may be a good thing. There is a huge canyon between the two. The truck has a new driver, but there's still one bullet hole inside the truck's cab. A chunk of seat cushion sliced out as evidence has been covered with a patch. According to driver Norman Anderson, I really do not worry about driving it as long as it doesn't involve a trip to South Texas. I feel like if I go there, I should put an X on each side of my neck, draw a dotted line between them, and write, "Cut here." Yeah. Scary shit.